The day after baseball's All-Star game, traditionally, one of the quietest on the sports calendar. Today, not so much.
Not so much. A 4 a.m. flurry of activity in the newsroom. That's what we had. Let's get right to the breaking news. And for that, we bring in our NBA insider, Adrian Wojnarowski. Woj, tell us what you know about Kawhi Leonard at this hour.
David, Toronto is finalizing a deal with San Antonio to acquire Kawhi Leonard. DeMar DeRozan and more would go from Toronto to the Spurs, but both Leonard and DeRozan have been made aware that a deal is likely imminent, and the sides will try to finalize an agreement here later this morning.
Yeah, Woj, that's what I was going to go to. How close are there any hurdles in the way to getting this done?
DeRozan is the key element going back from Toronto to the Spurs. Both Chris Haynes and I, in reporting the story, were told that the deal is close and that there's an expectation that they'll get done later today. DeRozan, late last night, was made aware of the deal, and he has started to tell teammates and those close to him that he expects he's on his way to San Antonio.
Woj, Kawhi has let it be known he's not welcoming the deal. He wants to play for the Lakers. We know that. He's got a year left on his contract. What's the rationale for the Raptors making this deal?
Masai Ujiri, their president of basketball operations, this is a move that takes some courage because he has no expectation that he can re-sign Leonard. He will have a season to try and sell him on Toronto. He is trading away potentially, a second-team All-NBA player in DeMar DeRozan, who had his best year in the NBA, for, really one of the preeminent talents in all the league, who played only 9 games last season with a quad injury, and who has made it clear that he wants to be in Los Angeles, that he will sign there in free agency next summer. It's a somewhat similar situation to what Oklahoma City did with Paul George last year. They were able to sell George on Oklahoma City, never let him even get a meeting with the Lakers in free agency. But this is a sizable gamble, and what it would do if they lose him in free agency, if the deal goes through and they lose Kawhi Leonard to L.A. or somewhere else in free agency next summer, it would expedite a rebuild in Toronto. But this is the conversation that's gone on for like 10 days to 2 weeks pretty seriously between the Raptors and Spurs, and they're going to try to culminate that later this morning with an agreement in principle.
All right, later this morning, we'll continue to monitor it all day here on SportsCenter. Woj giving us the very latest as we close in on a Kawhi Leonard deal to the Raptors. Rachel Nichols provided us with the screenshots of DeRozan's Instagram story. He starts with, "Be told one thing and the outcome another. Can't trust him. Ain't no loyalty in this game. Sell you out quick for a little bit of nothing." He continues with, "Soon you'll understand." And then finally, "Don't disturb." So DeMar DeRozan making his feelings known very clearly there in that Instagram post.
Breaking news on SportsCenter this morning: the Spurs and Raptors made it a blockbuster night, finalizing a deal that would send Kawhi Leonard to Toronto for a package including DeMar DeRozan. That, according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski and Chris Haynes, who also report neither player is expressing enthusiasm for this trade. Both teams excited about what each player could bring to their franchise. It was a lost season for Leonard due to health issues, but over the last 3 seasons, Leonard ranks 15th in offensive efficiency among players with at least 100 starts. He's even better on the defensive end. He's 4th in defensive efficiency. And while DeRozan has been a good offensive player for the Raptors, he's barely inside the top 100 in defensive efficiency in that span. Our NBA front office insider Bobby Marks joins us now on SportsCenter AM. And Bobby, you tweeted earlier this morning, like early, that this deal is like high-risk poker, but you like it for Toronto anyway. Why is that?
Well, I think from the risk side, Randy, is that you are getting a Kawhi Leonard who is on a 1-year contract, is on an expiring contract. He will not sign an extension in Toronto. So you are dealing him almost like a one-year rental, where you are going to have to in-house recruit him for the year, similar to Oklahoma City and Paul George. But when I look at it for Toronto, a team that's been to the playoffs 5 years in a row, has not gotten past the Eastern Conference Finals. Your window to win is right now with this group, and if you can get a top 4 player and Leonard, you go out and do it, even with the risk of him not being there in 2019.
Okay, but let's talk about the financial impact for 2019. How could this help or hurt Toronto money-wise in the long run?
Well, when they signed Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka last summer, they did it to short-term contracts. Basically, they aligned themselves with DeRozan. They will still be over the cap next year in 2019 if Leonard does leave to a team like possibly the Lakers. Where it does get interesting is in 2020, and I think Masai Ujiri has embraced a rebuild. If Leonard does walk, the only player on the books that year will be Norman Powell. So without Leonard, we will be looking at a full rebuild in Toronto in 2020.
You mentioned Raptors president Masai Ujiri. If you're dealing with a guy in Kawhi Leonard who missed so much of last season with a team with which he has won an NBA Finals, how do you still go along with this deal considering his lack of enthusiasm to come play in Toronto?
You make the trade, and now you recruit him for the whole year like Sam Presti did with Paul George. I know there is the concern with the injury. He only played 9 games last year, but it is rare when an all-NBA player like a Kawhi Leonard becomes available on the trade market here. Here is a man in Masai Ujiri, has full confidence in himself to go out and make a deal that many general managers really would not do right now.
All right, ESPN NBA front office insider Bobby Marks with the Inside Force. Bobby, we appreciate it.
Brian Windhorst is going to begin deconstructing this. Is anybody happy in this trade?
You know, Bob, we're going to have to wait probably a year or so to really know if there's a winner or loser here, because this is one of the more bizarre star trades I've seen in the last 15 years covering the NBA, because we don't know about Kawhi Leonard's health. That's a really important factor here. Is he going to be the same player he was 2 years ago when he may have been able to lead an upset of the Warriors in the playoffs? Or is he going to be diminished somewhat? Will he stay in Toronto? Will DeMar DeRozan be a good fit and continue the Spurs level of competitiveness? This is going to be one that's going to be difficult to call today. Yeah. What I will say is this. The Raptors got a really good discount here, and they leveraged this trade, and they got a way to find a way to accept this risk. And this could elevate them to the top team in the Eastern Conference. They are really good if Kawhi Leonard is himself.
Now you talk about his health. You would think, though, the Raptors, certainly there was a physical involved, I would think, and it was a rigorous one. So you still think there may be a question here?
There hasn't been a physical yet.
No.
Kawhi Leonard has 48 hours, I believe, to report. But then he potentially could, have that extended. It's possible, Bob, that the Raptors would waive the physical here because they are really interested in just getting Kawhi on their roster, even if that means taking a gamble. That is the next layer of this trade. We think it's done. They had a conversation and cleared it with the league today. The teams put out press releases. Greg Popovich is having a press conference. But we're not 100% sure this is going to go through. But obviously the Raptors have had to vet this. They knew that there's a possibility that Kawhi may not show up right away.
All right, this is bizarro world, to say the least, Wendy. All right, it even gets stranger. Let's put up on the screen the goodbye relative tweets that the Spurs put out for Danny Green. In the same time, they were also saying thank you to Kawhi Leonard. And the conspiracy theorists on the internet, and Lord knows there are a few dozen of those out there on their sofa. And look at that big font for Danny Green. Look at that tiny little font for Kawhi Leonard. And Tom Haberstroh points out on Twitter that the official release from the Spurs omits Kawhi's finals MVP, his All-Star appearances, Defensive Player of the Year, his 2014 ring. Everyone is saying, boy, the Spurs are just brushing him to the side.
Yeah, there's no love lost here. This was a really bad breakup. I think the Spurs handled this with some level of maturity. I've seen it go worse. Let's go back to 2010 with Dan Gilbert as being the Class A example of that. But this was no love lost here, not only between the Spurs and front office and Kawhi Leonard, but his own teammates. And that's why we all knew that this eventually was going to happen, whether it was going to happen today or in August or in September, that Kawhi and the Spurs were done. And this is not something that happened in San Antonio before. They have been immune from this. And how they handle this is really going to affect them as a franchise. They have elected, Bob, to trade for a player who can help them maintain some level of competitiveness. They elected not to wait for prospect players. That is a bit of a controversial decision. Some other people in this situation would have gone for more younger players and more draft picks. So we'll see. This is not part of the Spurs book. They've written many chapters. There's a gospel out there. This is outside their normal operation.
So the book of intrigue is only in the second or third chapter, and we don't even know if there's, well, you say no physical. We're waiting to see, is it official? Well, yeah, we think so. Brian Windhorst, thanks as always. And now, going yard for the books.